Hello, and welcome to DCTV's Primaries edition of Candidate Conversations. I'm Michele McCray, Member Services Coordinator here at DCTV. Today I'll be speaking with your candidates for delegate to the House of Representatives, Mayor, City Council Chair, and other City Council hopefuls from Wards 1, 3, and 5. As a nonpartisan, nonprofit organization, DCTV will ask each candidate the same questions. We will allow about 5 minutes per response. Here are the candidates for Attorney General for the District of Columbia. Joining us is Ryan Jones, running for the office of Attorney General for the District of Columbia. Hello, Ryan.
Hi, how are you?
I'm fine. Thank you for joining us today.
No, of course. Thank you for having me.
Okay, so our first question is regarding DC statehood. Do you support DC statehood?
I do, yes.
So what do you think would be the most effective next steps towards achieving statehood, and what is the role of Attorney General in achieving statehood?
We need votes. I think we have to push on other states to vote for DC statehood. That's imploring other residents across the country to call their representatives and say that there are disenfranchised individuals in our country that need representation in Congress. And you ought to go and vote for statehood so that district residents can have budget autonomy, they can have control over their laws, and basically have a safer operation of their life in society.
Thank you for that response, Ryan. Now, the Attorney General decides whether and how to charge juvenile offenders, including possible alternative approaches to prosecution. In your opinion, how is the city addressing issues related to juvenile offenders, and what would be your plans as Attorney General?
The Attorney General, as you accurately stated, has oversight of juvenile offenses here in the District of Columbia. We have an amazing restorative justice program that allows individuals to not be put on the margins when they are charged as adults or incarcerated with adults, and put them in a different trajectory for the remainder of their life. So, as we must use the law to hold individuals accountable and account for the victims that are harmed by certain actions, we also must owe young folks an opportunity to be meaningful contributors to society. And as Attorney General, I want to create a balance of those harms on a case-by-case basis, go through and evaluate who's best for diversion programs, who's best to have to be held accountable, because what the law does, theoretically, you specifically deter individuals and you generally deter with punishment. You generally deter others from acting in a similar way by ensuring that people are held accountable. That's the theory of the law when it comes to crime, whether it's adult or juveniles. And we have issues now with young people getting involved in circumstances that we need to ensure don't continue to happen, because we need to keep people safe. We need to make safety a certainty, not a elusive soundbite.
Thank you, Ryan. Now for our final question, what else would you like voters to know about you or your vision for DC?
I'm Ryan Jones. I'm a native Washingtonian born here in the district. And I want nothing more than to give back to the city that's made me the man that I am. I created a law firm in 2014 in order to help a friend of mine who was up against a fraud matter and had no other access to an attorney. Throughout my years in courts, I've been creating access to justice for people who haven't always had the opportunity to have an attorney advise them. I've been in various courts, U.S. District Court for the District of Columbia, taking on civil rights discrimination matters in employment. I've taken on trademark infringement matters. I've taken on wage theft matters. I've been in circumstances where I'm doing workers' compensation before DC agencies. I've been in the Office of Administrative Hearings, handling appellate matters from DC agencies. I've been in DC Superior Court, civil criminal, and family. I practice before the DC Court of Appeals routinely from matters that come up from either the Office of Administrative Hearings or DC Superior Court. And I've honed my skills over the last decade, and I think now is the most important time to course correct where the government is going to ensure that we rewire a system to uplift people. And I've been doing that in the courts, and I believe that I have the innovative legal mind necessary to create the change that I'm referring to when it allows for access to justice, when it allows for a system to be rewired to empower people. And given my experiences, given where I'm from, the Office of Attorney General can do just that. When I get into office, I have a 4-point plan. One is creating a task force that reevaluates the entire DC code. That's how we have the operation of our lives. And we need to make sure that the laws are fair and equitable throughout, including the DC municipal regulations. Next, I want to create an expungement clinic that's present every day in DC Superior Court, or maybe even have a satellite office for that. That would allow individuals who do have a record or have been charged with crime to get on fair footing, to go out and get a job and do meaningful work to help society. Next, I would do the same thing with wills and trusts, allowing people to go and get access to an attorney to protect their property so that they can ensure generations behind them have wealth to step into. Because that is the number one way wealth is achieved in this country. And that is the number one way to cure the disparities that we see so often here in this city and across the country. We would do this by teaming with outside counsel for both the expungement clinic and the wills and trusts, as well as review of the DC code. Lastly, I want to expand public advocacy. I want to do that in a new and creative way by using angel litigation funding from outside sources along with outside counsel to take on the important matters that we talk about, from housing to wage theft, consumer protection, and fraud matters. And when we use this arm to protect DC residents, we'll be doing it in such a way that we deter bad actors from continuing to act in a certain way, while also bringing a benefit back to DC residents and the district itself. I'm happy to be doing the work that we're doing now, and I want to expand it for the ability to create the course correction of how government operates for district residents. And just a little bit about myself. I started at an early age in sports. I believe that created character necessary to take on tough fights that we will be experiencing and that I will be confronting as Attorney General. I played basketball in college at Elon and Stony Brook, and I played a little bit after before deciding that law school was the place that I should go. I went to Southern Illinois University School of Law. I worked very hard. I graduated in 2.5 years and ended up coming back to Philadelphia, where I clerked for a judge, Judge Glennis Hill. And that's the Court of Common Pleas in Philadelphia, where you saw the criminal circuit. And at that point, I came back to DC to pursue my LLM at George Washington's School of Law, and I got my legal master's in intellectual property. And at that time, I was able to start my law firm and embark on the journey that I've just shared with you. I thank you so much for your time, and I appreciate the opportunity to share my story. And I would really appreciate you going out to vote for me June 21st here in Washington, D.C.
Ryan Jones, running for the office of Attorney General for the District of Columbia. Again, thank you for carving out time to be with us on Candidate Conversations at DCTV. Much success to you in your continued campaign.
Thank you so much. I look forward to seeing you out there on the campaign trail.
We have joining us today Brian Schwalb, running for the seat of Attorney General for Washington, D.C. Hello, Brian.
Hello, Michelle. Great to be with you.
Glad you're here. So for our first question, it's regarding D.C. statehood. Do you support D.C. statehood?
Absolutely.
So what do you think would be the most effective next steps towards achieving statehood, and what is the role of Attorney General in achieving statehood?
Well, as you know, DC statehood really is a political question now for our Congress. One of the most important things the Attorney General can do is continue to be an excellent first-rate state AG office as an exhibit to the rest of the country of how well we can govern ourselves here in DC. Our first independently elected Attorney General, Karl Racine, has done an extraordinary job elevating the quality of the lawyering and the efficiency and effectiveness of the AG office. We're recognized across the country as one of the premier state AG offices in the country. And that goes a long way to making the case as to why we, as the District of Columbia, the folks that live here in DC and work here, can take care of essential governmental functions like running our justice system. So that's an incredibly important thing to do in terms of making the case for statehood. I'm very proud that Karl Racine has endorsed me as the next Attorney General, as has the prior AG, Irv Nathan. And I think we work hard every day to make our case to the American people, to the Congress and the senators as to why it's fair. We pay taxes, we serve in the military, and we should have full representation in our Congress. I think we also have to work every day to expand meaningful home rule, expanding what we can do for ourselves as DC residents, even if we aren't yet a state. Can look like expansion of control of our criminal justice system, having the ability for the Attorney General, as opposed to the U.S. Attorney who's appointed by the President, to make critical decisions that affect us and our criminal justice system, like whether a young person who's 16 or 17 years old should be tried as an adult or as a young person. I think that decision should be made by an elected official answerable to the community. And I do not relish as Attorney General having to make that life-altering decision about whether a young person is tried as an adult or as a juvenile. But I do think the decision needs to be made by someone who's elected by the people.
Thanks for that, Brian. Now, the Attorney General decides whether and how to charge juvenile offenders, including possible alternative approaches to prosecution. In your opinion, how is the city addressing issues related to juvenile offenders, and what would be your plans as Attorney General?
I'm so glad you asked that. I actually have a 6-point action plan focused on reducing crime and making our neighborhoods safer. And a large part of that is focused on how do we deal with young people who are committing crimes. I think that for juvenile offenders, particularly repeat violent offenders, our system has to hold people accountable. There has to be an understanding that the system will cause anybody who's broken the law and hurt somebody with a gun or carjacking accountable with meaningful consequences. We have to be able to close cases effectively, working with MPD and other agencies that gather and process evidence. And we have to work with our court system to make sure that cases work their way through efficiently. But even when we're prosecuting young people, we have to remember that they're kids, that their brains are still developing. We need to give resources to young people so that after they finish being punished, they come out with a chance to be successful and independent and pursue something that they're good at, so that they will live independently and legal lives, which helps us reduce recidivism. I think the decision on how to charge young people committing crimes is a very, very important one that the next AG and the prosecutors under his leadership need to take very carefully and use good judgment. We need to ask ourselves, why did a crime occur? What are all the circumstances that impact? Because many of our young people are caught up in cycles of trauma and violence and retaliation. There are oftentimes a lot of extraneous circumstances that can impact why a young person may make a bad decision. And for kids who are committing low-level offenses, maybe they're truant, they're not going to school, shoplifting, those are oftentimes warning signs that kids are getting into trouble. And our system has to look at that and say, how do we get resources and attention, maybe through diversion programs or restorative justice processes, so that we get kids back on track. Of course, I think we really need to invest more in keeping kids away from the criminal justice system to begin with. That's early intervention on the root causes that sometimes get kids caught up in criminal justice. Investing in early education, social emotional learning, therapy. Oftentimes kids are suffering trauma. The pandemic has, only made that worse. So I believe we invest early. Our job is to keep kids away from the criminal justice system As AG, I don't want to have to just wait for kids who've committed crimes so that I can prosecute them. I want to try to avoid kids from getting caught up in the system to begin with.
Now, Brian, here's our last question. What else would you like voters to know about you or your vision for DC?
Well, I'd like everybody to know that I'm a third generation Washingtonian. I love this city. I've got 3 daughters who are fourth generation Washingtonians, and I think our city has incredible promise. But we do have some real meaningful challenges that are confronting us. And I think the law in the hands of the right lawyers is the single most powerful tool we have to address those challenges. I think the fact that Carl Racine, who may know better than any person in this city, has endorsed me in my campaign is something that I want the voters to understand. People want a trusted referral. If somebody were sick and facing a very difficult decision, like my wife and I were confronting when my wife was the mother of just an 18-month-old, our youngest daughter, we asked trusted referral sources on who we should go to for help. And I think that people in the District of Columbia have a trusted source in Carl Racine, who's given his recommendation. I also want the voters to know that I'm a fair election candidate. I'm running with small dollar contributions only from individuals, no PACs, no special interests, no corporations. My campaign is transparent, and the voters are entitled to know that their next AG is independent and is beholden to no one. So those are the things I'd like people to know about me and my campaign.
Thanks, Brian. Brian Schwalb, running for the seat of Attorney General for Washington, D.C. We thank you for your time here at Candidate Conversations and at DC TV.
Thank you, Michelle. Great to be with you.
Now we have Bruce Spiva running for the office of Attorney General. How are you today, Bruce?
Great. How are you doing?
I'm well. The first question is regarding home rule. Do you support DC statehood?
Yes, I do.
So what do you think would be the most effective next steps towards achieving statehood? And what do you believe is the role of the Attorney General in achieving statehood?
Sure. Well, first let me say that I've been fighting for this cause for decades now. I actually am the only candidate in the race who was once arrested fighting for DC statehood in an act of civil disobedience. I'll hasten to add. But I also have fought in and out of court. I've testified before Congress. I've marched through the streets, and I've filed briefs in court in support of local autonomy and statehood. And right now, I think it's so important because we have fulfilled all responsibilities of American citizenship. We serve on federal juries. We pay more in federal taxes per capita than any other people in any other state in the country. And we have fought and died in every war. And so we should be a state. And right now, we don't have any representation in the Congress, and Congress often interferes with our own purely local affairs. So right now there is a bill pending in the Congress. It has been passed in the House of Representatives that would shrink the district to the District of Columbia to the mall, the National Mall, and certain federal buildings like the White House. The rest, all the neighborhoods in DC, all the rest of the land would then become the new state, which would likely be called the Douglas Commonwealth after great Washingtonian Frederick Douglass. This is constitutional. It could be passed with 51 votes through the Congress if we had filibuster, through the Senate rather, if we had filibuster reform. And so we're closer than we've ever been, and yet we're still a ways off because Senator Manchin has staked out the position that he thinks that this requires a constitutional amendment. It doesn't, but he has said that he believes that. But when we get a couple more Democratic senators who are willing to support this idea, then I think we will achieve statehood. I think to answer the latter part of your question, this will be a big part of what I would like to do as DC Attorney General is spread the message about our disenfranchisement because we need allies. We've gotten this far with allies from around the country because we don't have a vote in the Congress. So the only way to get this done is to form alliances, and we've done that. We've got 46 senators on record as supporting statehood, and there are 2 or 3 more that we think would support it if a vote were brought. And as I mentioned, the House has passed it already. And so I think I would use the bully pulpit of the office to spread the message both outside of the district to other states' attorneys general and other audiences that I might have outside of the District of Columbia to try to strengthen our alliances with people who can help us achieve statehood. I would also help rally the troops within the district because there are too many of our fellow district residents who have kind of given up on the quest for statehood. I think not out of a sense of apathy, but a sense of resignation that it's too difficult to achieve. And I think we have to energize them to engage in the fight again, because only we can really achieve this. We need allies for sure, but it's going to require a demand. As Frederick Douglass once said, power concedes nothing without a demand. And sometimes we give the misimpression that we're satisfied with our colonial status here in the district. And I think nothing could be further from the truth. And so we need to organize and energize people within the district as well to demand statehood and to keep the pressure on until we achieve it.
Switching gears now. Our next question is related to charging juvenile offenders. The Attorney General decides whether and how to charge juvenile offenders, including possible alternative approaches to prosecution. In your opinion, how is the city addressing issues related to juvenile offenders, and what would be your plans as Attorney General?
Yes, well, one I guess let me just clarify one thing. Right now, the Attorney General does decide generally how to charge juveniles, but in one category, unfortunately, the U.S. Attorney actually has the discretion in cases of very serious crimes to charge juveniles as adults. And basically it's within the discretion. And if the U.S. Attorney, the federal prosecuting attorney, does that, it takes it out of the hands of the district. And if the child is convicted, they ultimately, after they reach adulthood, are sent away to an adult prison, which is something that I think should almost never happen. There is a bill pending which would give the DC Attorney General the discretion to recommend to charge of a juvenile as an adult. And if in the cases where the AG recommended that, it would be reviewed by a superior court judge, so one of our local judges, to decide whether that's appropriate or not. And I think that's where the discretion should lie. It should not be within the hands of an unaccountable federal prosecutor. So I support that act. It's called the Redefinition of Child Act. And I believe that's something that we need to get done, because I think we need to try to avoid, almost in all circumstances, charging juveniles as adults, because all that happens then is that they are sent off to adult prisons. They are re-traumatized. Many of these young people, those who commit serious crimes, are in fact themselves traumatized individuals who come from difficult circumstances. And so we need to be providing the types of wraparound services to try to get them back on track. And an adult prison doesn't do that. An adult prison just turns them into hardened criminals, and it results in recidivism, because these young people will come out of prison at some point, and you'll have a very high recidivist rate. I do think in certain circumstances when we're talking about very serious crimes, it may be we need to look at legislation which would give us the ability to take a middle path where we can hold the child charged as a child past the age of 21. Right now, if someone is charged as a child, no matter how serious the offense, 21 is the outer limit to how long they can be held. That's not enough accountability for some of the most serious crimes like murder and carjacking, but it's also not enough time oftentimes to help that young person get back on the right track. And so I'd like to see us take a middle path in some of those more serious cases. So I'm not just talking about, throwing up our hands and saying, oh, you get a free pass because you're a young person, but I am very against sending young people into adult prisons. I think also more broadly on the issue of juvenile justice that we need to improve our focus on root causes of crime. And so our young people are going through a lot of trauma, particularly in our lower income neighborhoods and Black and brown youth. Very high rates have been the victim of or witnesses to violence themselves. We have the pandemic, which has wrought a lot of trauma. So we need to provide mental health counseling. We need to provide substance abuse counseling where that plays a role in crime. We need to make sure that we improve housing stability, because getting thrown out of your housing, particularly as a young person, is a very traumatic event, which could also, I think, ultimately lead to crime. We need to do all these things because they're the right thing to do, but they are also things that will make us safer. And that's the thing. It's not a choice. I think it's a false choice to say either we can be safe or we can do the humane, moral thing of providing these services to our young people. Providing these services will make us safer. And that's the only, I think, the best path forward.
And the final question, is there anything else you'd like voters to know about you and your vision for DC?
Yes, I'd like them to know, first of all, where I'm coming from. I have never forgotten that I stand on the shoulders of many people, but most prominently my mother and my late father, both of whom came out of the Jim Crow era South, and both of whom went on to lives of service to others. My mother as a nurse, and my father first as a public school teacher, and later as a college administrator. And my father graduated from an HBCU in 1954, the year that the Brown versus Board of Education decision came down. And he believed strongly in the power of the law to change our lives for the better, particularly minority folks. And he was the one who inspired me to become a lawyer. And he's the one who instilled me with the courage and the sense of duty to try to fight for change. And that's what I've been trying to do these last 30 years. I've been practicing law for 30 years, practicing in the areas of civil rights, fighting for voting rights, fighting for consumer protection and antitrust enforcement. And so I have a broad background in fighting for everyday people, including arguing a case last year in the United States Supreme Court. I've tried cases all over this country, including here at home. I've argued appeals in courts around the country, including here at home. So I'm well prepared to take on this role. I also have a great deal of management experience. I formed at one time my own law firm, which was dedicated to doing plaintiffs' class actions and fighting for everyday people. And then for the last 7 years, until I left to run full-time for DC Attorney General, I was at Perkins Coie doing voting rights work, fighting vote suppression laws. And I was also the managing partner of the DC office of Perkins Coie, which is an office of over 200 professionals. I also was a member of the firm's executive committee. This is a firm of over 1,200 lawyers and over $1.1 billion in revenue. So I have the management experience, but even more importantly, I had born from this experience of fighting for the public interest for 30 years. I also have the vision, I think, to lead what I view as The city's largest public interest law firm, the DC Attorney General's office, has 700 professionals, 350 lawyers, and the mission covers everything from criminal justice reform to antitrust enforcement to consumer protection, workers' rights, housing justice issues. And I am the best prepared in the race to be able to carry forward and push forward that public interest mission. And that's what I'd like to do. I want to fight for housing justice, fighting slumlords who push low-income tenants out of their housing in order to make way for high-end condos. I want to enforce the promises that developers make when they get city money to preserve a certain amount of affordable housing. I want to, as I've spoken of, fight for criminal justice and juvenile justice reform, for workers' rights. I've represented unions. I believe in the union movement, and there's a lot of wage theft going on in our city. So I'm the best prepared to do that because that's what I've been doing for the last 30 years. I've been the David against the Goliath, corporate interests and the district government itself in some instances, fighting to help people achieve justice. And that's what I'd like to do as Attorney General.
Thank you so much for joining Candidate Conversations, and best of luck to you and your campaign.
Thanks so much. Appreciate that. Good to be with you.
We thank all the candidates for joining us. The District of Columbia will be holding its primary elections on June 21st, 2022. We'll see you this fall ahead of the general election in November. For DCTV, I'm Michele McCray.